you, Adam. Hi, everyone. As folk are coming in, I will just do a quick intro for today. Thank you again for being here on time and ready for today's session. We are really happy to have you with us. I'm Ana, for those of you who don't know me. I'm from Brazil, currently in Chile. I'm part of the Solvable team. I think all of you are kind of familiar with us and what we do, but we facilitate spaces for organizations navigating transitions, and we are more and more deeply invested in the question of why are solutions not solving, and how can we enact change within the contexts we are embedded in, despite all the constraints and the gravitational pull of the status quo. Adam and Anthony are here. They are part of the Solvable team. Do you want to say quickly hi before I introduce Todd? All good?
All right. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. As you know, I'm in what's colonially Vancouver on the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. For those that are new, it's great to meet you in this space. And yeah, we're excited to get the series kicked off and really appreciate your support in being here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. My name's Anthony. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. We're really excited about the series and also today's session with Todd. So I'm excited. Thanks.
Yeah, me too. We are also joined by Todd Kashdan, who is the author of the book we'll be diving into today, The Art of Insubordination, How to Dissent and Defy Effectively. Todd, would you like to quickly introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, thanks for being here and being a book lover, thought lover. I have run the Wellbeing Laboratory before the term was cool since 1998 at George Mason University, and we study pretty much everything you want to talk about at a cocktail party. Friendship, anxiety, stress, resilience, social anxiety, um, curiosity, creativity, perseverance. So we're trying to make the world a better place, and we're trying to have the evidence to find the best practices. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for accepting the invitation. I'm really curious to have the conversation with you and dive deeper into these topics. They are all very relevant as part of the series as well. So just before we dive right in, I know we are all excited to start, but just to give you a bit of context of what we are doing here and what the series is about. So this is part of New Works, which is a series we started in 2021 to bring together writers who expose kind of the wiring of dominant systems and invite us to glimpse what else could be possible beyond it. So this particular series, Organizational Mazes, explores what it really takes to create change inside organizations, especially when our agency feels limited and the risks of speaking up are high. So we will look at traps, hierarchies, twisted dynamics, and unspoken rules that keep systems stuck and shape the messy realities that are usually polished out of official reports and case studies. This series will run until June 2026. We will be having bi-weekly meetings alternating between author sessions like this one and dojo sessions. That's how we are calling the more practical sessions, where we will be applying what we are learning and unlearning. You are all invited, of course, to continue this journey with us to hopefully redesign these organizational mazes. And we chose to start the journey with the Art of Insubordination because, you know, this process of insubordination within organizations often comes at a real cost for the transgressor. There is, I think in general, there is this certain romanticization of change making as this grandiose, virtuous thing, but actually the bulk of the work is very frustrating at times and soul consuming, and more often than not less effective than we would like it to be. So insubordination isn't just a test of courage, it's tests relationships, stamina, and even the sense of self and professional identity that we construct. And that's why we have this deep reverence for the psychological and relational dimensions of insubordination, as we believe this is where the inner journey meets the outer context. So it's a pleasure to have Todd here with us, being able to share more about his experiences and his knowledge on the book. So we created this as a kind of space because we know not everyone has the space to experiment in their roles. We are trying to create a kind of sandbox for practicing rupture and repair in this more curated environment where the stakes are lower for us to build the muscles and the confidence to bring that same courage and strategic awareness back into the context we are embedded in. So with that, before we dive to the conversation, I will pass over to you, Adam, for us to get a quick sense of the room.
Thanks. So just as a context for the way we've structured the session today, so it runs for 90 minutes. We're already 8 minutes in. We're going to start with a couple of Mentimeter questions, which those of you who've been in our space before have probably participated in it, or you may have done it in other spaces. I'll turn it over to Anthony, and Anthony will be in dialogue with Todd for somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes, establishing some of the questions around the book. And then we're going to have an opportunity for you all to come into the dialogue. So we'll do this in a kind of more fishbowl style, virtual fishbowl style. We will actually have the opportunity to be in discussion together. If you don't want to be on video, you can, of course, share your questions in the chat. But for those of you that do want to enter the discussion, there will be a space to actually be in direct dialogue with Todd and others in the room. Then we'll come back for a few closing questions with Anna and Todd, and that will wrap us up at 90 minutes. So that is the structure for how we're going to run the session today. And I will, first we want to start off with a couple of Mentimeter questions. If you haven't used Mentimeter before, you can use this QR code and do it from your phone, or you can do it on another tab on your browser. You can go to menti.com, and when you go to menti.com, you want to enter this code 83888607. I'll just give you a sec to be able to do that so that you pull it up. This is actually a good chance to test the toolbar, and if you know how to use reactions, if you could give me a thumbs up if you've like made it in. That way I have a sense of like, yeah, thanks, Katie, you got it. Yeah, a non-technological thumbs up. I like it. Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah, Joe, thank you. Lila, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Ethan. Anybody else having problems getting in? Diane, good. Yeah, Mitch, all right, great. All right, let's rock. All right, so we have two questions that and we wanted to share to open this space with you. And you should know with Mentimeter, your answers are anonymous, and you can also answer as many times as you want. So I hope that's set up that way. So yeah, I say that and then I'm like, did I change that setting? Okay, so let's start with the first. Either way, your name is not going to be associated with the responses. Okay, the first question is, what comes to mind when you hear insubordination? What comes to mind when you hear insubordination? Danger, punishment, good trouble, pushing back, doing something that you shouldn't. Once again, challenge and pushing back, foot dragging, form of resistance. Interesting, Todd, you'll like notice a lot of these words that are from the book too, that you use too. Being strictly out of compliance. Yeah, fascinating. Risky business, uncooperative, counter will, pushing boundaries, and rebel fun. I like the combination of those two things together. Rebel fun, defiant, and defiance. A reaction to poor leadership. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a feedback response. Deep care. Yeah, insubordination is deep care. And troublemaker, yeah. We've got good trouble and troublemaker. Refusing hierarchies and power structures and anger, not following rules. Yeah, which also assumes that rules are clear and expected to be followed. Awesome. I'm going to move on to the next question. Thank you all for that. The second one, we want to get specifically into the feelings. From the affective side, what feelings come to mind when you think about being insubordinate? Mhm. Scared, fear, anxiety, angry, exhilarated, uh, curiosity.
I'm stealing Exil terrified.
Yeah. Defiance, thrill, anxious. Yeah, a lot of anxiety, stress, frustration, energized, defiance, nervous-sided, exhilarated, hurt. Yeah, and I'm noticing like some of these are very much about the causality that brings one into a state of insubordination, and then also what it feels like in the process of being insubordinate. Depleted, um, interesting, yeah, that we don't really, I don't think anybody said, kind of fulsome or coming into themselves is the kind of opposite of depleted. Radical, yeah, having no other choice, the last line of kind of defense. Tense energy, passively aggressive, tired, pushed to the brink, and wits end. Yeah. Thank you all in my values. Oh, well, there we go. There's the fulsome part. In my values and liberating at the same time. This is a very, very powerful list. And I'll make sure after the session also to share it, but it also provides a really great context to start building from Todd and Anthony. So with that, thank you for the Mentimeter responses, and I'll share those slides out after the session. And we will now turn it over to you, Todd, Anthony. Rock and roll.
Hi, Todd. Thank you again for being here. We're really excited that you decided to take this journey with us. So thank you. My first question is, what lived experiences motivated you to write this book?
So there's a longer one, which was I was raised by a single mom. My dad walked out when I was 2. And one of the things about being, and I'm probably not the only person in this room who was raised by a single parent, is you learn a lot. You learn a lot about what it's like to be a woman in the 1970s. You learn a lot about how evil partners can be, even though at some point in time, there must have been some love there. And you also learn how to be very independent very quickly because when you have a single parent that works, and you're in the 80s, you are basically figuring out everything in the most inefficient way possible, which is trial and error. And one of the things is I didn't know what the social norms were. I didn't learn how to tie a tie until I was in ninth grade. I didn't learn how to change a flat on a car until I was in 12th grade. I had friends and adults that stepped in randomly in the course of my life, and I wanted to write a book so that people, whether they had two parents or they had a difficult path such as myself, that they wouldn't have to go through trial and error. Here is a straightforward guidebook of you can defy the status quo because very few people fit into the status quo because we have such unique DNA and backgrounds.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point. One of the things I've noticed reading the book was there's a lot of science in here, right? And yet you call it the art of insubordination, but why didn't you name it the science of insubordination?
The most important thing from the word insubordination, why I chose that, is the practice. I mean, every single week, if I just broach whatever's in the news, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, is it's always a time for principled insubordination. I mean, if you live in the United States, every single day is a day for principled insubordination. If you live in a work environment where you're being treated unfairly, every 8 to 10 hours a day requires principled insubordination. You're an unsatisfying partner in a relationship, requires principled insubordination. So for me, um, the art's everywhere because all science does is tell you, on average, extroverts tend to be happier than introverts. On average, women tend to have better skill at one-on-one conversations compared to men, but it's a small effect. But if you look at how do you apply this individually, that's the art, right? And so for me, I create scientific studies, I read scientific studies, I synthesize them, but I'm interested in how people apply them. And there's no clear guideline of how to do that. And that's what I want to help kind of be like a Sherpa to help people.
Right, absolutely. Um, you describe principled insubordination as intentional, values-driven dissent. Why is that definition, that specific definition, crucial? And what goes wrong when we confuse principled insubordination with defiance or devil's advocacy or any of those other buckets?
Yeah, people like to have their devil's advocate in an organization. There's research by Charlene Nemeth in 1974 that shows genuine dissent is effective at liberating people in a team environment. Having a devil's advocate actually doesn't do much because people realize very quickly you don't really care about these things. You don't value these things. You've been assigned to respond to these things. You're a bot. You're a Ukrainian bot. So it's the language is very important. This book could have been called Defiance. It could have been called Dissent, but that doesn't give an inkling to kind of how we live in our environment. Someone put it in the first two questions that was asked today of it's about like obliterating power structures. And the thing about insubordination is it's the notion that as human beings, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, we all live in these social hierarchies. And some of them are very clear, like an organizational hierarchy, who's got the parking spots that they actually has their name on it right in front of the building versus have to walk, 500 meters to get to the office. And then there's in terms of the household, like who's in charge of the money, who's in charge of decision making, who's in charge of what goes on the weekend. When you come to your high school lunch table, you walk around, you figure out, who are the socially attractive people that you would like to sit with, and then who do you actually sit with. So there are these hierarchies there. Who's the most intelligent person in the room? Who's the funniest person in the room? Who's the most charismatic person in the room? And part of insubordination is saying you don't have to wait your turn. You don't have to wait until you're chosen at the top of a hierarchy before you realize and can point out there's something wrong with what people said. There's something wrong with what people did. There's something wrong with the system overall. And it's hard to do. And all those emotions that people described are par for the course. But we shouldn't wait until we become the C-suite character for all these social hierarchies. And that's really at the crux of principled rebellion.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I tend to agree with you, right? However, my experience on this earth, in this form, um, brings in other factors like our socialization is against us, right? And then at times, like you come close to a line in this book. When do we cross that line? I know the goal is to kind of blow it up, but we have some social norms that are just they came out of nowhere, and then we've arranged things around them.
So there's a lot in what you just said. Let me take the one about blowing things up because I think that's important. The goal of this entire discussion, this entire book, this entire framework, that's really what it is. It's a framework. It's not to increase the amount of rebels that exist. It's can we have the intelligence to know whether a rebellion is required and the wisdom to know how to do it. And if we're the audience, can we better tolerate people that question and challenge the status quo? Now, we all suck at this. Just like you said, we are socialized, we're human beings, we have groupiness. We have lots of groups that we are identifying, our little backpack we carry. I'm a little Jew boy. I'm a New Yorker. You know, I'm a weightlifter. I'm an ex-athlete. I'm a girl dad. These are all little identities that I carry in my backpack, and those influence my confirmation bias, my motivated reasoning in terms of what information I allow in with no skepticism whatsoever, and what I challenge and question immediately. And I'm not even talking about politics right now. And so we have to acknowledge that we've got baggage. And one of the bits of advice that I can give right off the bat is we should have fewer things in our knapsack. And I think we identify with too many things, and each one makes a little bit more rigid. And especially if you have power or authority over another person, from parents to C-suite, the more baggage you have in terms of what you identify with, the more disenfranchised minorities lacking agency you have intentionally or accidentally created.
Mhm. Yeah. So can you say more about the values you kind of uplift there? It's like a through line throughout the book in terms of autonomy, critical thinking, freedom of thought, and the desire to seek out useful information regardless of where it originates.
Yeah, nobody wants to be rejected and negatively evaluated. And one of the things that I don't think I wrote in the book, doesn't matter, is what I call the dissenter's dilemma, is you dissenting and disagreeing with the group. And it could be your friends of deciding like, where do we go on the weekend? It's good for the group, bad for you. You get tension, you get conflict, you get disagreement, you get people that dislike you. That happens there. Sometimes, and this is where somebody wrote down, like, you know, good trouble. Sometimes you have to take the hit because it matters enough for you that I will absorb the tension. I don't want it. I know it's going to affect my mental health, my physical well-being, but I'm going to do it because this thing matters enough to you. And if you don't find over the course of a month period or a year period that you're engaging in principled insubordination, I would actually argue is that you've got to go back to figure out what your values are. If you're not having arguments with the people that live in your household, I would say that you're probably not talking about what you care about. It's not because arguments by themselves aren't necessarily good or bad, but you should be discussing things that are important. And I think too often, with our hard wiring from evolution and kind of and how we've been socialized culturally, is we go for self-preservation so we can live another day and pass on our genes. And we forget you only get one chance this life. And like for me, you know, I've gotten lots of friction. I've gotten lots of like pushback for things that I've said and I've done, but a good chunk of those times it was like I didn't want to be the one to do something, but no one else stood up and said anything. And I took a major heat, but I can look back on it, you know, 5 years, 10 years later and be like, glad I did it. Didn't like the process, didn't like all of what I had to deal with mentally, but it had to be done. And I think that's an interesting thing about dissent and defiance is the timeline. In the moment, it sucks. And you wish you didn't have to do it. You know, Rosa Parks, and I talk about Elizabeth Jennings 100 years before Rosa Parks, they didn't want to have to actually disagree and say, I want to sit on the bus. They didn't want to say, like, I want to take the trolley. It was, why, as a human being, would I not be allowed to because of the color of my skin? And so, you know, the, just because the conflicts, the content of the conflict changes, is there are Rosa Parks moments, there are Elizabeth Jennings moments where you say, no, like, I'm not going to take this anymore.
Mhm. No, that's an excellent point. Another thing I found very interesting, it's like you're saying something about winning, losing, or this binary that's created there also within this conversation about insubordination. I would like for you to elaborate more on that. And then I have some follow-up questions around maybe the current state of things, especially DEI as,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
an example. Yeah.
No, 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 please do. And I mean, that's, you know, that's it's a big black box, but play with anything. So there are wins and losses, but they change over the course of time. And that's an important one. Let me give you a concrete example from this morning. I mean, it happens all the time. So I'm on the faculty grievance committee at George Mason University, which means if the faculty have problems with the upper administration, including the president of the university, they turn to my committee that I'm part of, decide things. The first meeting that I was part of, it was doesn't have to know the details, but basically there was a faculty had a problem. everybody started talking about like their opinions. And I was like, hold on a second. I hate to be that person that's the minority of one, but we know from the science of how to make good group decisions, if everyone starts revealing what they think, and it's very clear who said what, and we differ in our popularity, immediately you are now having contagiousness on pushing for one direction over another direction. All of the science shows we should be deciding our opinions independently, and then they get revealed, but you don't know who said what. This way, you take away racial biases, sex biases, newcomer biases. We have done everything wrong from the get-go in terms of how to make a good decision. Now, no one else agreed with me. So I didn't win. And actually, just today was the second meeting. It happened all over again. So I had to reveal it again. So 2 losses in a row. But one of the interesting things about being a principled insubordinate is that I know that beneath the surface privately, I am slowly altering people's views about this. And they're hearing this, even though I'm getting friction. Nobody likes me in these meetings. But the end goal is like, I want to make good decisions to happen there. And eventually, my hope is at some point, they're like, hey, maybe Todd's approach is actually not that bad because he provided the references of like how this actually makes better decisions. So there are wins and losses, right? So in terms of, and one of the ways of being effective, I know I'm jumping around in terms of interventions, is consistency is one of the most important things if you're the minority. And we could define minority at any point in time. But me as the minority who's actually saying, we're doing this the wrong way, is just consistently and kindly just tell it over and over again. Like every time it happens, like, listen, the thing is look, as soon as this really cool cat who's intelligent, well-spoken, middle-aged white guy just spoke, guess what? The next 3 people agreed with him right off the bat. Do we know whether they agreed with him or do they want to curry favor with him? That's a problem because our goal is not to get cohesion. Our goal is to figure out how do we help these faculty members.
Mm-hmm. And so that the tension between the cohesion that you're talking about, even in a societal level, it seems to, I don't know, rupture, or people go silent when we need those voices the most. Ergo, my reference with DEI and things of that nature, especially today. And is it about stamina, or is it about something else that's preventing us from acting or moving forward?
You heard it in the 2 questions in the beginning of today. The fear of retribution, the fear of being punished, the fear of having the spotlight put on you, the fear of losing your privacy, the fear of losing your job, the fear of losing your social capital. All of these things are real. And especially in a DEI space that happens here. And I'm sure we do not have the same view about DEI, which is fine. That's not the problem. The problem is, can you have a constructive disagreement and get ideas on the table, or do we retreat into our corners and remove 3 things that are essential? I believe there are 3 psychological strengths that have to be activated for these kind of constructive disagreements. One is the humility question. Do I think I'm the smartest person in the room? Most often the answer should be no, because I don't know how smart other people are. Like Anthony, we've only been spoken in our lives for an hour. And so like, I don't know if you're smarter than me or not. So I'm like, listen, I'm going to learn information because you're from another state than me and you've got different experiences than me. So that's a strength that has to be activated. And if we don't see it, we can call it out gently if we see the opposite of humility, right? Narcissistic entitlement. The second one is perspective taking and perspective getting. People are really bad about the last one, perspective getting. The first thing is like, you know what? We haven't heard from Jessica at all during this entire conversation about DEI. And I just want to make sure if she wants to say something, she can do it privately, publicly, but I don't want to make sure that there are no voices that aren't included in this room. So perspective getting. You can't take a perspective until you get someone's perspective. And the final one is curiosity. You have to be, just because you're open and receptive to ideas that are different from you does not mean that you have any intention whatsoever to change your view. And I think people accidentally link these things together. If I listen to you and I give you a little bit of a platform, that means that I agree with what you're saying and I've supported you. Like the idea that like we have platformed somebody. This has become a bad term where I would say we should be platforming people all the time, but make sure that there's time and energy built in where you can actually offer counterpoints and question what they say. I think almost anyone could be platformed, but don't give them free reign where they can say and do whatever they want. That's I really believe about the separability of these different elements.
Yeah, it reminds me of a couple things. One, we've lost almost a desire to be complex or to understand complexity. It's like an and type dynamic. And the other thing is you said something about people having great conversations as one of your goals of this book. And I think we've lost the ability to have dialogue or be in dialogue as well.
We can't sit with the notion of I mean, and I know people, there should be a great diversity in every conversation we have that's remotely charged. So there are probably people here that have ended old friendships, which are really rare. Like people that knew you before you had your career, right? Who like know the goofy, weird, strange, juvenile delinquent side of you. And they've ended old friendships over their voting record. And I've written many articles to say that I think this is problematic because we have narrowly defined individuals by very particular silos of their identity. And to me, one of the ways of having better conversations and constructive disagreements is we should be broadening the profile of what people are and not, everyone's pushing to minimize people into, are you for or against this issue that I care about? Did you vote with or against me on this issue? And sometimes people have very particular specific roles in your life, and it's okay for them to have a narrow part of your life, but it's very quick to toss people. And let me actually just add on this because this just occurred recently with um, is he the Secretary of Defense, Chris Hegswith?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I was having an argument with a friend of mine, a gentle argument about things he said about women in the military. And this was my major issue with it, is that if you think you should have the same physical standards for men and women in the military, the problem is you are making it conditional that every job in the military requires physical skill and stamina. So I don't want to lose any intelligence officers because they can't do 50 push-ups in a minute. I don't want to lose anybody in the field who's extremely good at being multilingual and can make allies with people on the ground level just because they can't lift up an extremely heavy form of artillery. And the idea that you would narrow all of these roles that are so essential for diplomacy, peace, war together into how many sit-ups, how many pull-ups, how many push-ups you can do such the easy way to get into this conversation about men and women differences in the military, where you don't even have to kind of brush the fact that their qualifications are different, because this is one of 100 set of skills and strengths that you should be considering. And I always would love if you have active dissent and conversations that occur right after these type of speeches, conversations like statements, rules, just to make sure that you've covered your ground. Because here's what happened. After a speech like that, you don't just silence people. You have just lost a good percentage of people who are going to be your greatest intelligence analysts because of your concern about pull-ups.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more with regard to the timing and things of that nature. The last thing I think I want to cover is you talk about, I'm going to screw this word up. I have it in my head. Epistemistic motivation, and you defined it, or say psychologists define it as the willingness to expend effort to achieve a thorough understanding of the world.
Yeah, epistemic motives, right?
Yeah, it seems like you kind of presented that as a North Star from this vantage point for groups to achieve. Like, not every group has that motivation, and the desire should be for groups to have it. But is it also contextual as well in terms of that motivation?
So I have an aversion to contextual and nuance because these words get thrown around as if we can't be specific about what are the situational parameters when things occur. And so I feel like it's often used as just like this empty space. I'm not criticizing you. I just talked about this yesterday on a podcast.
Yeah.
So for me, whether it's a PTA meeting, whether it's an athletic team, whether it's a military squadron, epistemic motives are always there, which is basically is have we spent more time and effort trying to show how similar we all are, or have we tried to get the unique knowledge, skills, and abilities into the group so it could be better? And so that's at the core of epistemic motivation, which is basically how do we get all the knowledge and all the abilities and all the potential in the room? And so I don't we could probably come up with some context where it's not relevant, but I would say there's enough situations to say this should be a fundamental motive. And I'd even go further is that when I work with organizations, I say that you should have a caveat before every single meeting. Like, let's clarify what's going to work, what's not going to work as we try to make the best possible decision as a group. One thing that's not going to work is everyone trying to win performative like love and attention and belonging and fit in from things you say. I want you to think independently. I want you to think critically, but don't focus on the ideas. Don't make ad hominems against the person. And I want to think epistemic motives, which is basically, do you have enough knowledge right now? Do you think you're the smartest person in the room where you don't need more information?
Yeah, I think we agree on that. I think my point was the question is exactly where you went with your answer in terms of I believe those motives always exist and should always exist. That's not my experience working with others.
Oh, yeah.
Or as a goal or North Star or our our objective is to.
Oh, most organizations and groups are terrible at decision making. It really often comes down, if I can think of my entire 20-year career of working with organizations, what is the most frequent problem? Three people who look like me are around my age eat up 80% of the airtime. They are extroverted, they're loud, they're assertive, they're male, they're relatively tall, they're big, and they eat up space. And what we know is there's about a correlation of 0.02 between how loudly you speak and how often you speak and how intelligently you speak. So it's really clear, and yet we fall in love with proxies because we're so focused on efficiency that we forget that is efficiency important to the thing that we're doing. Unless you have a serious time urgency goal, like you work in an ER hospital, you rarely need things to be decided within minutes.
Right. No, thank you very much. I really appreciate that because I think you're touching on something. Insubordination is a big word. It's a huge word with this often very negative context, but the motivation for being that big word is often, I didn't see this on the list, is love.
Yeah.
Like the young lady, the example from the school that you used in the book. It's really about, I really care. And I care so much, I'm willing to risk.
Yeah. 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 And the thing is you take a very controversial example, right? Ed Snowden. This popped into my head. This is a guy who was despised, loathed by at least 50% of the country. He was unpatriotic. He had insider information. He shared it outside of government channels. And I have friends in the military who, if his word is mentioned, they'll walk away. Now, you fast forward 10 years later or 15 years later when Snowden released that information. The reason that when you have a smartphone where it now asks you, do you want this app to track you or not to track you, is because of Snowden. And the reason that we have options that say Do you want to have cookies or not have cookies that track you? It's because of Snowden. Like Snowden focused his principle insubordination, love him or hate him, was about the world should not deprive you of autonomy and privacy in your life. Now, the particulars we can argue about, but that was like his mission to happen there. You might not like the way he did it, but you can respect of, I like the fact that you cared about people's privacy that happened there. You could have done it better that happened there. But the end result is every single person in this room and every single person that listens to this conversation has benefited from Snowden. And that's to me is like living a valued life.
Thank you. Adam, I will turn it over to you.
Great
All right.
questions, by the way.
Yeah, great. I loved listening to both of your dialogue. Thank you so much. So we're going to move into the next section here. I'm going to leave, and I know there are a few, Mike and a few other people that joined kind of late. So just in terms of instructions for how we might flow with this next section, the invitation is to come into dialogue with each other and with Todd. Todd may also step out of dialogue. You don't have to stay in, Todd, unless you want to, but I'm going to assume you're going to be in unless you raise your hand otherwise. So in the toolbar, many of you found it before because you did the reaction to show me, but in the toolbar, if you go under the react button, you have the option to raise your hand. We're going to use this raise hand function so I can manage who comes into Spotlight in dialogue and who comes out. So if you would like to come into the dialogue, use the raise hand function. Also, if you're in dialogue and you're ready to step out and make space for somebody else, please use the raise hand function as well. So this is a way that, in real time, if we were in a physical space, you would just get up from a chair. This is what we're using the raise hand function to work just like that. So you're welcome to stay in and bring whatever questions, bring in your own experiences. This is to make space for the incredible depth of experience that I know is held in this group, because I know many of you very well. There's a depth of sophistication and also a wide expanse of different experiences based on sectors in this room. So I'm really excited to bring in and invite you to bring in your own contexts and experiences, and some of your researchers as well, and your research into this dialogue. So I am also going to pause now the recording because